The first to use the term Renaissance was Jacob Burckhardt in his 1860 writing, but in the 16th century, Giorgio Vasari had already talked about rebirth to underline the renewed attention to classical art and culture starting from the 400s. The beginning of this period of particular splendor of the arts is located in Florence in 1401, the year of the competition for the construction of the second bronze door of the baptistry. The Medici family, one of the major patrons of works of art, promoter of humanistic culture, was fundamental. The Renaissance is divided into three phases. The initial one, up to about the 500s, is called the First Renaissance. In this period, the centrality of man emerged as an active and transforming force which, through art which concretizes the image, understands better the functioning of the world and the perceptive relationship with it. The drawing becomes the planning tool par excellence. The codification of the perspective allows to translate the three-dimensionality of the space into two-dimensional image through the use of projective geometry that significantly influenced architecture too. In the design of buildings whose form expressed the geometric rigor proposes the new standard of beauty. Finally, the rediscovery of classical antiquity recovers the harmony of proportions, the enthusiasm for formal perfection, and the tendency to imitate nature by representing it with the study of proportion, movement, volume, and space. The artist, no longer a workshop man, but a core member, became part of the main intellectuals of the time. In this context, while Brunelleschi, Masaccio, and Donatello gave birth to a new artistic vision, others, such as Beato Angelico, Filippo Lippi, and Domenico Veneziano, applied the rules of perspective, but they retained characteristics of the late Gothic tradition, creating works with elegant line, diaphanous color, and diffuse light effects. Guido di Pietro Trosini, known as Beato Angelico, was born in Vicchio Mugello around 1395. He entered the Dominican order as Fra Giovanni. Called Angelicus Pictor or Angelic Painter for his gentle style, he was promoted Beato for the intense religiosity of his works and his exemplary human qualities. He frequented the main artists who animated Florence in the early 15th century. From his early activity, the triptych of St. Peter Martyr and the Virgin with Child and Saints remain in San Marco Museum in Florence. From 1436, he worked at the Convent of San Marco, granted to the Dominicans by Cosimo il Vecchio de' Medici. In the Vatican, for Pope Eugenio IV, he painted the Chapel of the Sacrament, now lost, and later, commissioned by Pope Nicholas V, the Chapel of San Stefano and Lorenzo, known as Nicolina. In 1447, he began the decoration of the Chapel of San Brizio in Orvieto, finished by Luca Signorelli. He died in Rome at the age of 68 and was buried in Santa Maria sopra Minerva. His most significant works were those made in the Convent of San Marco between 1438 and 1447, characterized by simplified and lightened figures, soft and dull colors, and full lighting, certainly influenced by the environment where monks lived by contemplation and prayer. Here, he first painted the altarpiece of San Marco of the major altar, one of the oldest examples of polyptych, with the figures located on a single plane. Later, he realized more than 50 frescoes for the decoration of the cloister and the cells, always placed in the wall opposite the door next to the window, to symbolize an opening on the physical world and one of the spiritual one, both for their decorative function, but especially to help meditation and spirituality. One of the most famous works is the Annunciation of the North Corridor, set in a portico of simple Renaissance elegance, bare and essential. The vanishing point is inside the portico itself, whose only decorative note are the Ionic and Corinthian capitals. In the background, a garden enclosed by a fence alludes to the Hortus Conclusus, that symbolize the virginity of Mary and the earthly paradise, close to man after the original sin, and that only the coming of Christ, whose first act is the Annunciation, will manage to console. The arrangement of the protagonists along the diagonal is innovative, so they participate more effectively in the space as in earlier works, such as the Annunciation of the Cell Tree or the one today in the Prado, where there are also the humble gesture of Mary between acceptance and subjection, and the sobriety of the angel, who responds with a similar position of the arms as a sign of submission. The monumental figures are isolated in the perspective view of the portico, with a sense of silent spirituality. Below, near the base of the central column, are painted the words of the Annunciation, just below an assignment to prayer in Latin. The perfect and meticulous style, the bright colors, the strong light, the counsel, the shadows, bring the scene to an almost unreal and divine dimension. The Mocked Christ is among the most famous works of the cycle. In the bottom, the contemplative figures of the Virgin and of Saint Dominic in silent reading are addressed to the spectator. Behind them, as a projection of their reflections, stands out the central figure of Christ, seated on a simple seat that recalls a throne. The stick that Christ holds in his hand is a scepter party and the yellowish sphere of the golden globe. The green curtain is the background of the main figure and the core of the scene, where are the symbols of his suffering, sticks, spitting, and hands that slap him. Despite the crown of the thorns and the blindfold, Christ maintains an imperturbable calm, transmitting a sense of immobility. The extreme simplicity of composition gives clarity without renouncing the effects of rare mastery, such as depth on several planes or subtle chromatic variations. For example, Christ's robe is made with a careful study of the volume, which recalls the drapery of a marble statue. Among the other frescoes in the convent are the Crucifixion with the saints of the chapter hall that presents an innovative iconography showing through complex allegorical system a series of saints lived in the most disparate areas and places, and not the usual characters of the Calvary. Here, it dominates a mystical and contemplative sense linked to the salvific meaning of the event, the redemption. There are also the coronation of the Virgin, dominated by a white light that makes the sacred figure stand out, charging them with a silent mysticism. Noli me tangere, where stands out the contrast between the solid spatial location for Maddalena and so ethereal for the supernatural Christ. The Transfiguration, in which Christ, standing majestically in the center of the scene, opens his arm with a gesture that announces the crucifixion by dividing the fresco according to the golden section, and the Virgin of the Shadows, an experimental work which owes its name to the effects of light and shadow studied starting from the real light source at the end of the corridor where it is located.